So, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed educators, distinguished guests, welcome to today's webinar on personalizing education, differentiated learning, and differentiated assessment. It's truly an honor to have such a diverse and esteemed audience for joining us from across the country, representing the backbone of our educational system. As we embark on this journey together, let's take a moment to reflect why this topic for today holds such an immense significance in today's educational landscape. India, with its rich tapestry of cultures, languages, and diverse student populations, presents both as a challenge and an opportunity for we educators in delivering effective education to every child. I remember the Sanskrit proverb which says, Vidya Dadati Vinayam. That means education which bestows humility. Indeed, that's why we embrace the principles of differentiated learning and assessment. In the words of the American educator, William Arthur Ward, the mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, and the great teacher inspires. So, with 29 states and almost 7 union territories, and with over 1.3 billion population, it's very important that this topic needs a more discussion at the educator level, at the we teaching fraternity level, that when we have such diverse population, do we need diverse teaching learning practices? Do we need diverse assessment practices? And that's why we have here for. So I would welcome officially on behalf of our team to two great educators and guru, Dr. Skand Bali and Mrs. Florina Fernandez. Welcome, sir and ma'am, to our webinar. So to begin with a quick introduction of Mr. Bali. So he's an educationist for almost 25 plus years, having joined and is the current principal of the Hyderabad Public School in Begumpet. And he has been the founding principal of the Adani International School in Ahmedabad, earlier worked as the principal of G.D. Goenka World School in Gurugram as well. So sir has been a housemaster and served the Doon School, Dehradun, for almost 12 plus years. And after that, the Army Public School in Dakshai. He is the recipient of 3 Triennial and 2 Long Service Awards, along with 2 IAYP India Recognition Awards. He's an accomplished writer, being in the field of geography himself, written several books to his accolade, and sir has earned his master's degree in geography from the Punjab University and a postgraduate certificate in education from the University College London, UK. So welcome, sir. Now we have with us Mrs. Florina Fernandez, who has been in the field of education for almost 30 plus years, currently heading as the principal of the very famous Ramnivas Bajaj English High School in Mumbai, which comes under the Rajasthani Sammilan Education Trust campus in Malad. She is a reading enthusiast, a TED Talk speaker, a workshop facilitator for teachers and students to promote language enhancement and well-being. She believes that education is a journey of discovering yourself and learning lifelong skills, both for the student and the teacher as they learn together. I would also take into account Mrs. Fernandez's graciousness for accepting our invitation at such a short notice, because we had initial speaker, Mr. Ajay Singh, the principal of the Scindia School, Gwalior, with us. But due to an unfortunate incident of Rajmata Scindia being passing away last night and the funerals being performed today, so we express our thoughts and prayers to Mr. Singh and the entire Scindia School community for same, and request a 5-minute of a short silence for our resource person's founder's mother being passing away. So 5 seconds of silence. Thank you very much. So, to get the wisdom from our speakers, Dr. Bali and Mrs. Fernandez, so we have got questions from a lot of attendees beforehand. So we would be asking one question each to Dr. Bali and Mrs. Fernandez, and the teachers and the heads from across the country can post in their questions to the chatbot, and the resource persons would try answering to their level best, and we would have an open forum at the last 2 minutes to inviting for a general notion for 2 minutes each. Over to you, Dr. Bali, to give a general thought on the topic for 2 minutes. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you so much, Arshid. First of all, my apologies for delaying the start of
Right, sir.
because I just somehow was not able to enter, and it was a little difficult for me.
That's
So,
what we
uh,
teachers are meant to.
I think that's what technology is all about.
True, true,
I'm very
true.
happy to see Ms. Fernandez as well, ma'am. Pleasure to see you across. So, differentiated learning and assessment is something which is very, very important in today's time and age, especially because number one, every child is different and unique. Not in terms of their physiology, but also their psychology, their biology, and the background they come from. We have children who are coming from aspirational families where aspirational families, not necessarily traditional families, but aspirational families of first generation learners who want their kids to do well, and they want them to get quality education. We are working and walking into a society where a child with different needs, different abilities, is expected to be in the classroom um, with the children of different abilities, right? So it's very important that as educators, as leaders, we look at differentiated learning, which is more personalized for each child, and we also look at assessments which are inclusive yet differentiated. For example, from equality, we need to move to equity. We need to make sure that all children in the classroom and in the school get equal opportunities as per their own physiology, their own psychology, so that they learn best, they grow best, and they make the most of the education system. And that's what I think we'll address it today in our discussion, and
True,
hope we'll get some answers.
true. Thank you, sir. Over to you, ma'am, for opening remark.
Well, good evening and thank you, Harshit. Though it was last minute, this is a topic that's most interesting and, like Sir said, a need of the hour. So, for me, as an for as an educator for 30 years, when I walk into an Indian classroom, I see a very diverse group. It's a group of students with varied cognitive abilities, skills, and also something that we need to consider is they come from diverse backgrounds, economic, social, family structures. So every student has a different learning profile. As a teacher in a classroom today, it is very easy to feel overwhelmed. But, it forces me to think of myself as a student several years ago. At that time, I think I was just one of those many faces. A student today wants to be known individually.
True.
During my time, any student have. So I developed my own learning strategies. So I remember as a high school student, I realized I learned better by drawing mind maps that I made of my own, by, a pictorial representation of facts. And, it makes me wonder that had I been taught differently to suit my needs, would I have been more creative? Would I have tapped my creativity and my potential at an earlier age? So, those are a few questions. So, as an
True.
educator and as a principal years later, these thoughts are always at the back of my mind, nudging me to be different, more interesting. And that's why differentiated learning and assessments is something that's very important. In fact, the NEP 2020 lays a lot of stress on this topic.
True.
And while I would say, speak of it as it being very easy, I know it is not something as easy to implement, taking into consideration the large class size, parental expectation, the focus on the syllabus and development, it becomes a little difficult and maybe
True.
overwhelming. But yet, we must not forget that it is very important. So, looking forward to inputs from.
Yes, thank you very much, ma'am. So we would start with our first question for the day, keeping time into constraint. We would keep our wisdom limited to 2.5 to 3 minutes max for each question, and then the audience gonna speak as well. So in India, where we are living now, called Bharat, where there are over 22 languages and where thousands of dialects are spoken, and keeping such diversity into consideration, we have first question for you, Mrs. Fernandez, that what exactly we mean as educator by differentiated learning, and how can schools effectively implement such differentiated learning strategies to support students with diverse learning needs? And have you implemented such in your school? Over to you, ma'am.
So, differentiated instruction or differentiated learning is actually tailoring lessons to meet students' individual needs and interests and also strengths. So, it gives them that flexibility to learn and also, in some way, allows a teacher to personalize learning. Now, there is a reason why it becomes essential. The first is that children have diverse learning needs. And in today's world, it's important to cater to them because we want to, learning is more about skill development and learning life skills and values. It's not about content mastery. From equality to equity, that's exactly one of the reasons because inclusion becomes very, very important. When we look at a class, the class can be divided into actually two broad groups. One group is students with different learning styles, for example, kinesthetic, auditory, reading, writing, visual, and the others are students with different comprehension capabilities. So these largely are the two main groups of a class, and we have to be able to address these two groups. Um, Differentiated learning would also help in motivating a child and engaging all the children. Have larger classrooms. Yes, of course, there are schools with a smaller class strength, but the emphasis in involving every child becomes important in every size of the classroom. Mastery in learning is definitely important, and preparing children for the world today is also a very important fact, as mentioned also by NEP. Um, there are various ways in which schools can consider, and that is one way could be managing the assessments according to the needs of the students. The teacher understands the students and creates flexibility, naming a particular group, but in her mind, she knows the various needs and the various manners in which every group can function. When she's planning her lesson, she plans her lesson, her teaching strategies, her assessment strategies, trying to ensure that there are various styles. So there can be lectures, there can be group discussions, multimedia, hands-on activities, some tech-based lessons also involved, and that caters to different kinds of students. The content must be adjusted to learn to the various learning styles. And finally, it comes to the assessment. So the assessments, we do know that some broadly pen and paper, right? But the other assessments, the formative assessments, can be of various styles. They can be portfolios, case studies, presentations, um, quizzes, and there are various platforms to go about doing that. It's important to also collaborate. So, as a team of teachers, it's important to collaborate, understand how we can have interdisciplinary teaching also, which will involve the students and see the connection. I think one of the things that students fail to understand or want to know is how does learning connect to life? So that is also important. Yeah.
True. Yeah, well said, ma'am. Because interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary is something which even the higher education focuses. In India, there had been certain universities which have been offering multidisciplinary courses from from long time ago. It's not something new that NAP has been spoken about, unlike speaking for the states or other UK-based states wherein they offer a different combo altogether. But the challenge here comes, ma'am, what I feel is about the implementation at the leader's shoulder responsibility. Because who will
Right.
not want as a leader to introduce French as a subject, music as a subject, any other undiscovered disciplinary as a subject? But there are a lot of challenges. So keeping those challenges in mind and the strategies which you have shared, we would request Dr. Bali to focus on the assessment part. And we have a question specific for you, sir. That could you please discuss the practical approaches to designing assessments that cater to these different learning styles and abilities? And is your school, or where have you been, or are you currently working, following any such innovative assessment practices which you would like the users to learn something new from you? Over to you, sir.
Hey, I would like to start by saying that assessment is something which we should not look at in isolation. It's a very broad aspect. It's a bit challenging as well in our education system. I'll take probably more than 2 minutes on this.
Sure.
First of all, the Indian population diaspora, you have a large population to deal with. And whether we like it or we don't like it, as Ma'am Fernandez also said, our board exams are pen and paper at the end of the day. And every child has to write that particular exam. In isolation, a school cannot have varied assessment systems which do not prepare students for that exam. But what schools can do is, how do we bring those children who are facing various issues into the classroom or in the learning in a way that they come as close as possible in writing the board examinations, so that with whatever help the boards provide them, whether it is a scribe, extra time, etc., is generally helpful to them, or subject choices. So what schools can do when it comes to assessment? The first and the most important part is that schools can look at the assessment at least from grade 1 to grade 8 internally in a more diversified manner. When I say diversified manner, definitely one component has to be pen and paper. But unfortunately, a lot of schools do not create flexible question papers depending on the need of the child. We do at our school. So children who are with special needs or learning gaps or learning difficulties, we create separate question paper for them. And we create a separate room for them invigilated by special educators who also help them understand the questions if at all there is a need. So we bring them closer and we bridge that gap. Second component which can be done by most of the schools is bring in inputs which will prepare them for life, as Ms. Fernandez also said. It's not about the marks, it's not about what you get, but make them emotionally stable and mentally tough along the way. So give them exposure outside the classrooms as per their strengths, their abilities, which could be some kind of intellectual inputs, which could be some kind of physical inputs, which could be take your class out of the classroom into the garden and conduct a biology lesson. Nobody stops you, right? If you are able to complete only 80% of the syllabi in a year for grade 5, skies are not going to fall down.
True.
But the moment you do that 80% well, and if 100% students can make the most out of that 80%, it's better than looking at completing 100%. So there is more flexibility which teachers can do or schools can innovate between grade 1 to grade 8. Grade 9 up, it becomes a little difficult task, especially if you are in CBSE or ICSE curriculum. If you are a Cambridge curriculum, then it starts from grade 8 where you have a checkpoint. Otherwise, most of the curriculum will encourage and incorporate those kind of things. Another important thing is, which schools can do, you can bring in various other kinds of assessments in the school. For example, some part can be interviews, some part can be a student coming and presenting the topic to the class at the lower end. So what happens is, when a child prepares a presentation and comes and presents it, he understands the concept better than just hearing the teacher. Right? So assessment is not necessarily a very closed approach. We can look at in the primary years or middle years where the assessment is also based on a collaborative work of the students within the classroom.
Correct.
You give them an assignment together, but again, the key is how beautifully you have created those groups. If you leave it open-ended, then three friends get together. One child who is a shy child may not get a chance to get involved. So these are some of the tools which educators can use. But yes, whatever you do, please make sure that you keep in mind the end goal. The end goal is you have to take your children to a board going class, whether it is IB, whether it is Cambridge, whether it is CBSE or ICSE. You have to prepare them to write a pen and a paper exam, which is whether it is hard fact, soft fact, correct fact, it is fact. So you have to take them closer. The problem happens is the way we conduct assessments, the gap between the learning of a child keeps expanding rather than you creating a bridge. So that has to be the approach of the educator. That's what I feel needs to be done when it comes to the assessment in this in our education system.
Well said, sir. Because I firmly believe that gap, which you rightly mentioned, the learning gap, because I remember there was a survey which said that 20% of the Indian children across all grades, from the lower nursery to grades 12 till their age 18, have some sort of learning disability. Need not be children with special needs, need not be, children with some disability, but there is a general learning disability. Because what I believe, we are somewhere or the other making our children, to mug up, vomit in the exam. We create toppers, we create this and that, but the actual learning power is missing. James Bond, there was a thing, James Holt, yes, he said that you cannot prepare a person for a world for which you know nothing. We never know after 5 years what kind of skills our graduating children of this 12th cohort gonna need post 5 years. So as a K-12 leader, when a child takes admission at the 24-25 session of ours, gonna graduate from our high school 2037, say 38 session. So what skills will then be needed is up to us. And as you rightly mentioned, up to grade 8, it is up to us as a leader. What kind of innovation, uniqueness, it's like playing with the game of assessment we can do, like, and reduce the pressure of the assessment amongst the children.
I just want to add here just
Yes, sir.
one line.
Yes.
I don't know how many of the viewers and all of you have seen the movie Shrikant. I
Yes.
saw it the other day and I was blown away. How the education system tried not to help the child, but where he reached, and that's a true story. So that is an inspiration for all of us as educators, that we have to create opportunities for children, irrespective of the background they are coming from. If you give them the right kind of tools, it'll be helpful. For example, one scene in the movie narrates everything about assessment. So the principal gives the book to the actor who was playing Shrikant and says, "Can you read this?" Obviously, he's blind, so he can't do that book. So he thinks for a minute and he gives his book, which is a Braille book, to the principal. He said, "Can you please read and tell me?" He said, "How can I read Braille?" He said, "Precisely. How can I read when I don't have eyes?" So I think that's the approach we need to change
True.
accordingly. Yeah.
True, true. Well said, well said. So I remember a small article of Dal Lake in Srinagar, wherein a small pretty girl was traveling by a boat and she drew a picture of a god. As per her, she was God. The deity which she drawn was a god. Next day, she went to the school and just passed it to the drawing teacher, saying that, "Ma'am, see, I've seen God, and this is the picture." And she said, "No, this is not the usual God which we see and which we worship. The usual God has this, that, and all that. How can you draw some deity keeping a speaker and acting as a DJ?" Then the girl said, "Ma'am, have you seen God?" So that you can vouch for it. So why can't the God hold a DJ with some speaker and act? So this is what perception and imagination of children is in today's time. And we as heads need to rethink that where are we pushing our children to? Being a topper by the merit list which we publish, or being an actual topper with the self intuition or the motivation which the child sees that, okay, I have done the best what we can. So thank you, sir. Next question is for you, Mrs. Fernandez. Of course, when we are speaking of teachers, when we are speaking of assessments, there has to be some kind of, training behind the scene to it. So what role do teacher development programs play in enhancing such educators' ability to implement such differentiated assessments effectively? Do you know any materials or resources which will cater to it and our users going to use it for reference? Over to you, ma'am.
So, teacher development programs are definitely very crucial for a teacher to enhance the ability to bring about differentiated learning. Um, Learning and teaching is a continuous process,
True.
both for the student and the teacher. And in no way should any team feel, and very often it's the leader of the school who ensures that this also is a continuous process where you continue to develop the teachers. And it is with all this help that they can um, create strategies to make tailor-made assessments. They can meet the diverse needs of the students. The first help that the teacher would need is to understand the differences in their students, differences or learning abilities or in comprehension capabilities. They should be able to understand these differences so they can create and cater the learning styles to those groups of students. Um, then also they have to introduce a whole lot of assessment methods. So formative, summative, there are project-based performance tasks. Each of them can be implemented by the teacher, and they changes that are happening. They should be able to analyze data, and probably these development programs will help them analyze data so they see the strengths and the weaknesses, because the strengths are also important. Very often we go around looking for the weaknesses, but the strengths are important to build them on. Feedback and communication to the child is important, to the parent who's also an important speaker. When it comes to tools, of course, there are various platforms. And I think as a teacher community, during the lockdown, we were suddenly pushed into this world where we went around swimming and we found so many various tools. So there are so many websites, Ed Puzzle, quizzes, Khan Academy, where they can get various resources from. You also have things like, and these have been tried and tested by teachers all over, Google Classrooms, Canvas, Moodles. All these platforms allow you to create different learning tasks, different assessment tasks for every child or for various groups of students. So it allows a teacher to tailor make it for the various groups. And it also, something like allows you to create very interesting formative assessments. It gives you immediate feedback, and it allows you to understand the kind of teaching learning process that went on. You have Padlet, Flipgrid, Jamboard. These are very interactive. And back again, all these cater to various learning styles. If I can give you an example of my school, we conducted a project-based learning for grade 1. It was something as simple as a EVS topic of clothing. And that clothing topic went teacher had the Socratic way of teaching, where she asked them questions and they went in depth into it. And it landed into them having a debate about why can't uniforms be styled differently. So the assignment went on them to them designing a different school uniform. And because it was project based learning, it went on to the art class where they designed it, went on to the math class where they went on to probability and measurements. It went on to English where they had to conduct interviews. So they discussed various interviews, and there was interviews with parents, interviews, and then they had to write, because it was grade one, they just had to write one paragraph about their creation in just 3 sentences. So it did help them, and this was learning for life. So from clothing, they went on to an entire area to understand why or why not. So that becomes important. And these are just a few examples of how we can manage. Obviously, having something like project based learning, which is very elaborate, you cannot do it in every subject and for every lesson. But if a teacher targets that I can have one project based learning per term, I think it can easily be done, and you'll encourage a lot of learning. And I very when he says that skill based learning, skills are very important up to grade 8. And the focus should not be on curriculum completion, syllabus completion, but on developing skills. Because from grade 9 onwards, your learning and teaching caters to the final summative exam of board exams, right? And the focus changes. But you have a lot of time till grade 8 to develop those skills.
Very true.
Thank you.
Very well said, ma'am. You know, Robert Louis Stevenson has a very good line which says that desire and curiosity are the eyes with which we see the world. Maybe children are having desire to do this and that, but what's missing in the Gen Z or the learning generation is the curiosity. As a commerce teacher myself, when we teach debit credit to children, does any children have this question in mind? Why is debit called debit? Why is credit called credit? So on and so forth, because there's lack of conceptual clarity amongst the teachers themselves. You pick up results of any school, I challenge Pan India, you will find accountancy marks very poor as compared to other subjects, you know. People struggle in scoring accountancy marks because of the lack of the conceptual clarity. So we say that we as teachers, my teacher, my mentor taught me that a teacher is someone who makes the child love the subject, irrespective of the complexity of the curriculum, irrespective of the hardness of the facts. A teacher is someone who makes a child love the subject. That's what we teacher trainers, that's what the teaching fraternity has to be. But keeping that thing into picture, we have next question for Dr. Bali in a very particular and a specific way for we to take a key takeaway. But before that, I would share a small resource with the educators. We are very well versed with Bloom's taxonomy, this and that, but I had conducted a session, something on known as the six thinking hat concept. And that is a very beautiful concept developed by Dr. Edward Dinobo. And I would be sharing a link so that our viewers, teachers, and heads can beautifully have six hats in a classroom, be it literature, be it any subject you feel like, with the help of six different hats, which resemble six different meanings. A content or a chapter can be taught in this way. And this we can use it as an experiment for the topic to adopt differentiated learning or something different in a different way. So next question for you, sir. How can schools create differentiated question papers that meet individual student needs while maintaining uniform academic standards? Do you have any particular method implemented in your career till date, be it at the Doon School or be it any other school you have worked with, or is planning any differentiated paper, maybe at a grade 10 or a 12 way? Because ultimately what matters is the board results. So do you have any suggestion for council or the board to adopt such differentiated assessment or paper-based mechanism at a broader aspect, which can benefit millions and millions of children? Over to you,
See,
sir.
Harshit, I think I did answer this question
Yes.
earlier as well in the earlier question.
Yes.
So when it comes to till grade 8, the schools can have multiple levels of question papers for different kinds of learners in the classroom, and they can be brought at par. So they don't feel that they are struggling or they are lagging behind or it doesn't impact their self-esteem. Unfortunately, when they come to grade 10 and grade 12, uh, beyond giving some leeway in each and every board, whether it is a standard level or a higher level in IB, whether it is mathematics or further mathematics in, or English as first language or second language in Cambridge, or for that matter, dropping a certain language in CBSE or things like that. boards have not till date come up with the creative aspect of providing question paper in a way which assesses a child as per his or her learning levels. Uh, it's not easy to do and implement that for boards either, because if you come up with a technology based or AI based assessment system where each child can select questions as per his or her ability, there will be a possibility that some students may want to fool the system, or those who don't need that may still try to work around. And the same goes for schools as well. We are all educators. There are two of us heading schools sitting here in the panel right now. You have lakhs of them out there. Everyone has a different thought process, and some of them are ready to go to the extent to do anything to get the school results boost up, right? So it's easier said than done. But definitely, what the governments or what the education department needs to come on is they need to come up with a detailed document involving stakeholders to come together and come up with a policy. Now, when I say stakeholders, most of the time governments invite very selected few people. They don't bring diversity on the table. When I say diversity, you have teachers who are teaching state boards, you have teachers who are teaching different curriculum, different boards, you have schools which are single sex, co-ed schools, you have schools which are boarding, day come boarding, residential, you have schools in the rural settings, you have schools which are under the government control, where some of the schools you have only one teacher teaching 5 classes. Bring all of them on the table together. Bring a few selected students together. Now, you can't bring everybody together, but allow a feedback form mechanism. Take their feedback. What do they like? What do they don't like? Do a vast survey in terms of with parents. Even if a population of 140 crore, if your 10 lakh parents respond to you, which is a very less percentage, imagine how credential or credible that particular feedback you have to work on. And then have your think tank sit together, brainstorm, and then come up with a policy. I cannot give a right or a wrong answer of assessments. All I can say is yes, it is very sad that in 2024, not just in India, but around the world, we are not able to create an assessment system which allows each child to flourish as per his or her potential. Because universities also look at things from that point of view. There are some of the top universities which are ranked top 20 in the world. What do they look? They say that they look at co-curricular activities, they look at other things, but they do look at SAT scores. They do look at class scores. How many of those universities, if I would request them to share their data, have taken students into those universities who have scored less than 50% marks? How many of them? Now, it's all flowery to say we do this, but unfortunately, the entire education system in the world is going in a certain direction. I think one country which needs to take a lead in that is India. The reason being is because our traditional education system before British came to India was very, very different for thousands of years. And that was on inclusivity, that was on individual strengths and weaknesses. So I think India has to take the lead in terms of showing to the world how education can be reformed and how the assessments can be brought to the level where every child is able to deliver ethically, accurately, as per his or her learning level. I think if that makes sense to what I've said, yeah.
Very much indeed, sir. Indeed, yes, because we have a plethora of intellectuals here in India, right? Any stream you speak about, we have the best scientists here who travels across the world working for MIT, Carnegie Mellon, NASA. This is a very, very listen that whichever stream you speak about, they speak. And I'm sure that if we have taken an initiative to discuss on this topic, of course, such topics needs more vast discussions at big more events and conferences for things too. And there will be something. As teachers, we are optimistic and it's going to happen. So final question for both of the speakers, and we would not make it topic specific. It's a general question. With all the experiences you had, 25 plus years in this sector is not a joke. So as educationists, as educational scientists, if I put forward, how do you envision the future of our Indian education system by comparing it with the past? When you was children, when you were doing your masters, your B.Ed, your other PhDs or so, and now when you're working at present, and how it's gonna be in future. So in 2 minutes, if you can kindly both of you sum up each. So over to you, ma'am, first, to give up your vision for the Indian system. Over to you,
So
ma'am.
since I've been a teacher and educator for 30 years, I have taught across 5 schools in Mumbai, and I've seen the different teaching strategies, the different methods, the focus of the school. And I can see there have been educators, even in the past, some of principals, worthy principals of schools who have tried to bring about change. One particular school that I was in, where the focus was purely on skills and not so the grade 10 examination results. And that was, as a teacher, there was a lot of learning for me. And even today, when I look at my cohort of principals, I know quite a few principals in the city and in the country who are trying to bring about change in their schools, within their community of teachers and students. They are trying to make a difference. Because today, for us, education is more about preparing you for life and teaching you skills for life. And we lay more stress on our alumni who will come back and inspire our future generations. I think that is what we lay focus on. So even if any board does not change the summative kind of assessment at a grade 10 or a grade 12 level, yet in our own way, in our own right, we will bring about changes. And I can see that already happening. So there are things, people are bringing about innovation, principals, educators are doing a lot. So I can already see that change happening.
So what is the biggest difference, ma'am, what you have felt or what you have missed when you were a student that time, maybe 30 years back, and now you nourish your children? What is a good or not so good impact, what you feel like? What is it? Are you missing something in the
So,
system when
like
you were children?
I began with right in the beginning. I was a face in the crowd, just a face, probably hidden. But today, it's different in a classroom. Every child is known, every child wants to be known, every child wants to be showcased. So whether I am a teacher in a class or the principal of the school, schools are changing, and we know each and every student, or maybe a principal knows a whole lot of students about their strengths. And strengths are not only academic strengths, we know their abilities, know their areas of improvement. So that's the biggest change I see.
True.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So what do you, sir? We even want to know the users, even one or two texted me like, what have been your experience in working in one of the most elite schools in the country and in the region of Asia, right? So that experience of yours truly matters. So what do you, sir?
Well, I don't believe in that. I think every school is important, and every school is elite in its own ways. And sometimes you find the best practices in the schools which are probably not known to the people. So I have that thought process. Having said that, I think it's important, as I said earlier, that India needs to look back to what was working for us for hundreds and thousands of years, bring that on the table. But there are 3 reforms I genuinely want Indian education system to take seriously. One of that, which I've been telling every time I get an opportunity, India need to introduce Indian educational services.
Yes.
You have Indian administrative services, foreign services, revenue services, railway services, etc., etc. Why not educational services? You don't want um, other people to lead education system. So that's something very important I think they need to do. The second important thing which I think India needs to look at is it's high time India should develop the Indian Institute of Education on the lines of IITs, fashion institutes, medical institutes, and so on and so forth, so that extensive research can happen in that particular institute. We need to invest in Indian Institute of Education in a big way, just like we are spending on IIMs, IITs, and so on and so forth. And third, and the most important thing, which is missing in our country, is the checks and balances in education sector. There is faculty which is exploited left, right, and center across the country. There are students, parents who are exploited across the country, and there are no proper checks and balances. There are no controlling authorities. There are no law enforcement agencies. They are there, but they don't have enough teeth to work on the ground. I think that is something which is very important. You will find a teacher teaching mathematics at 10,000 rupee as well in a school. I mean, it's a joke, which is even less than a minimum wage, which is being provided by the law. So these are the three pertinent reforms I think we need to come into Indian education system. If we want to become a global giant tomorrow, which we are all aspiring to, which we all believe that we will be, education is something which needs to be taken very, very seriously in our country. And we don't need to look out. We need to look within to see how we can improve and what we can bring on table. So I think these are some of the things which we need to do very, very aggressively. And probably, if you say, these are some of the steroids which need to be brought into education system in India.
True. True. Yes, sir. Indeed, very much, because why not? At the bureaucracy level, having such a vast system at the state and the central, why can't we have such services who are specialized in this sector as well? Because education is something you cannot treat it as a corporate or a labor factory, being treated or mistreated in a way. There's a proper way of doing it. And as sir mentioned about the Indian Institute of Education, a very strong point hit me, and that is why medical education is upstaring day by day, because medical research is implied in the medical education and the medical practice. That's why medical practice is evolving day by day. But the non-medical part, the general education part, our PhDs in education, masters in education, so on and so forth, the educational research is not implemented in our educational practice. If as per the B.Ed curriculum, the teacher starts teaching as per the proper lesson plan, 1 year also the syllabus of the curriculum won't be completed. So we have to rethink, where are we getting these staff trained? Because that teacher training is the most crucial aspect of a professional, to get themselves trained and come back at the scientist level to produce some document, or to train children in a way. So thank you, sir, for indeed. And I thank once again to all the viewers, all the teachers, all the heads attending our thing. We have few viewers from Uganda and Dubai as well who is attending the thing. And I'm very sure that this topic of differentiated learning and differentiated assessment, and I would like to remember Ms. Tandon and Ms. Gupta, our last month's webinar, wherein this differentiated assessment topic came up when we were discussing about competency-based assessments, that when we are speaking of differentiated learning, it's not just differentiated learning. At the end of the day, assessment matters. So why not different papers? If there are different papers, will it be accepted by the boards? If accepted by the boards, will it be accepted by the universities, taking into account? That's what it is. And I'm very much sure that Dr. Bali and Mrs. Fernandez were very much capable enough to give us more new resources, more new insights on the topic. So thank you once again, Dr. Bali and Mrs. Fernandez, for sharing insights with all the educators from Pan India. And to end with a beautiful message from one of the excerpts from my own article, that keep on pushing the boundaries and quality of education by making it a truly reflexive, inclusive, dialogic, and engaged space, and keeping spaces for rumination alive, so that the land of the mind, the intellectual curiosity, stays alive. So thank you all once again. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank
for
you so
being
much. Thank you.
here. We'll
Thank
meet
you,
next week.
Harshit. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.